Now I invite Dr. Lakshmi Madam for her talk on orbital infections, common to uncommon. She is the Senior Consultant Oculoplastic Services, Chakra Multispecialty Hospital. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Ishan. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Good afternoon. Very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Fairuz, for this wonderful program, and Ritija to help me log in. The session has been very interesting so far, and Shahid and Maya have touched upon many of the conditions which I'll be dealing in my talk now. Of course, you all know the symptoms and signs of orbital infection. Fairuz asked me to cover the uncommon causes also. I'll try to do some justice to that as well. You all know what happens to the cornea, eyelid, conjunctiva, and the most important thing other than the cornea is the optic nerve involvement. So we are worried about optic neuritis due to the infection. So disc edema may not be seen immediately. You may just have hyperemia. So why I'm emphasizing on this is, in addition to antibiotics, we may have to start the patient on steroids to decrease the morbidity to the optic nerve. So that is a very important factor. Of course, you have leukocytosis, fever, and all the inflammation and all the classical signs, which next talk will be covering. And the infection is again classified into 5 groups. So first, only the eyelids are involved, and mainly it's a form of a preseptal cellulitis. In group 2, what happens? Inflammatory cells are there, and the orbital tissues start getting involved. It is this stage that the vision starts showing a dip. This is a very important aspect, group 2. Now, purulent material will start collecting, and if it's a subperiosteal abscess, you have to be very careful because you can have a tight compartment syndrome. And of course, group 4 is diffuse abscess, and you may have severe visual loss. And 5 is where when it starts going towards the cavernous sinus, it's formation of thrombosis. Now, recently with mucor, we saw so many cases which went straight away to 4 and 5. Then, of course, nausea, vomiting because of mild raised intracranial pressure, orbital apex syndrome, etc., etc. But I don't think we can call this as Toller's hand, which many radiologists across the country interpreted it. Now, the sinus anatomy is very, very important. You must, in early on days, we were just making cuts and draining out the pus. This is about 20 years back. But after we learned some amount of sinus surgery, started working with ENT surgeons, we know that the widening of the recess has to be done if you want to control the infection. Along with antibiotics, a little bit of steroids, the patient is not improving, the widening of the recess, so opening of all the sinuses, we should know as orbit and oculoplastic surgeons, and to help to work with the ENT colleagues for this. Because most of us are trained with the second pass of FES surgery, where it's endo-DCR. The third pass is where you go to the posterior edge points, and the fourth is when you go up to the pituitary. That is very difficult for us as ophthalmic or orbit and oculoplastic surgeons, but it's very important to understand the anatomy, do repeated sinus endoscopies, which I'm sure many of you. Unfortunately, it was all due to mucor, but still the positive aspect of this is most of the towns and cities in India now, every one of us has started working with the ENT colleagues, ENT surgeons. We are going to have a lot of rapport, and this anatomy is very pertinent to help them. So what is the main purpose of this? To conserve the vision. I don't think we can afford to lose any eye due to orbital cellulitis. So this is a beautiful schematic. This is diffuse infection, know the upper anatomy. Now this is a orbital abscess which is confined. The important aspect here is this can go in for antibioma if you don't treat it well. So you have to, sometimes it can be masquerading for a tumor. Subperiosteal abscess, and of course the final stage is the cavernous sinus thrombosis. Complications I've already read. It can lead to death as well, as we have seen in mucor cases. And all these things, osteomyelitis, meningitis, endophthalmitis in certain cases, necrotizing fasciitis. I'll come to that later. Fatal toxic streptococcus syndrome, it's called. And this stage is usually the patient has comorbidities, multi-organ failure, and it's really devastating. So CT, of course, is very helpful for an orbital cellulitis, orbital infection per se due to bacteria. Here, CT is the most important because we need the bony landmarks to know where to decompress. But in mucor, we saw that we needed MRI, especially with a contrast, because generally in orbital cellulitis, we never give contrast. So MRI is again very helpful in certain conditions where you're not very clear, especially when it's involving the temporal orbit, when there's no contiguous spread from the sinuses. Sometimes the sinuses are absolutely clear. But of course, when the haze is there, you know it has spread. This is what we should avoid, this antibioma formation. So we should drain. And this is a subperiosteal abscess. So these are all the examples. This child was just improved with conservative treatment. I generally like to admit the child, give all the adult 5 to 7 days of IV antibiotics. Day 2 or day 3, start on steroids to decrease the mobility to the nerve. And in case it's not responding to IV, then we'll have to go in and drain the sinuses. And we should not wait for too long. We should avoid cuts like this. When the child came, already had 2-3 cuts. It's not of much help. As I said, we should go into the sinuses along with the ENT surgeon if required and open and widen the recess of the sinus where it is draining. So again, it's a periosteal abscess. If necessary, you can do a culture sensitivity because most of these are MRSA positive as well. So the corneal involvement should not be there. So in addition to a subperiosteal abscess, she was not responding only to drainage with the frontal sinus is a little notorious because the widening of the frontal recess alone may not be enough. In addition, you may have to make a cut. So she needed an external as well as an endoscopic decompression and to help her recover the vision because corneal involvement was already there. And in this child, again, you need to see multiple cuts of the scan. You should discuss with the radiologist. This can be very subtle and you can miss. This child needed 2 drainage. This was after the first drainage. And you see the subperiosteal abscesses. So outside, you may not have a severe proptosis or the compartment syndrome features. And in this patient, though it was mainly the maxillary and ethmoid, an external cut was also required in addition. So this is the widening of the ethmoidal area. This is the widening of the maxillary sinus. Go in, the hiatus seminaris should be approached. Widening should be done. All the pus should be drained. A lavage with antibiotics can be given. And this is more important these days where we had to use amphotericin B to give the lavage in the mucor cases. So group 2 and above generally need admission. Group 1, we can try to get away with the oral antibiotics if it is mild and preceptal. And steroids, as I have already mentioned, and endoscopic drainage, somewhere between end of group 2 to group 5, you definitely need to go in, especially group 3 and 4. You have to differentiate between hematomas where there is only blood collection and there is no infection. We have to closely monitor for it to resolve. Very rarely when there are a lot of external cuts only they go in for infection. Sometimes the child is viable, there's no fever and absolutely playing and chirping and feeding well. And you think whether we are dealing with a tumor, but then when we open up, we find pus. And sometimes you'll have to leave a drain like this for 24 to 48 hours, a capillary drain for the pus to drain out further. And again, this was another example where I almost thought this was 21 days or almost 25 days post some mild infection where there was residual swelling like this, but it turned out to be infection, luckily for the child. It was not a rhabdo. It has already been covered. Leukemia can present with severe sinusitis. Leukemia allows the midline spread and you have to be careful. This patient was treated initially for sinusitis, but he turned out to have AML. Sometimes in a child, it takes almost about 5 years. Akshay said that this pneumatization of the sinuses takes almost up to 5 years. Initially, only the ethmoid and a little bit of the maxillary sinuses developed. And this was a child in the neonatal intensive care unit about day 12 or day 13. The abscess was not getting resolved and had to take up this child and drain along with the help of an ENT surgeon. And it was a small external cut I had to make because it was lateral. So from the small area of the ethmoidal sinus, which had pneumatized, the infection had spread all along laterally and collected there. This was about 4 or 5 months of age when the child came back for follow-up. This was due to lacrimal abscess, congenital NLD obstruction, and this was drained. Again, you see, there is very little pneumatization of the ethmoidal and the maxillary sinus. So you have to go with the endoscope. Even the pediatric endoscope is very big. Sometimes you, along with the ENT surgeon, you may have to use their otoscopes to drain. You'll need the ones which they use for fine surgery for the young. Of course, lacrimal abscess luckily always confines itself below the medial canthus, but very rarely there can be severe infection. Endoscopic approach has really helped us. We don't have to make any external cuts at all. Go in straight away, and if the nasal mucosa is not very bad, finish off the endoscopic DCR in the same sitting. Sockets, be careful. Don't embark on socket surgery if there is NLD or infection, especially if you want to put in a DFG, because even today we are seeing so many cases like that. Even if one flat globule gets infected, we are finished. The whole DFG gets wasted. So again, this is NLD obstruction, sorry, upper NLD obstruction, canalicular and punctal obstruction, where the conjunctivitis can be very severe. This is STI. This is keratoconjunctivitis, where there can be a preseptal cellulitis. Sometimes it's very subtle, the infection, but in diabetics and immunocompromised patient, the signs can be pretty severe. This is multiple chalazion, which needed IND. Mucoceles, again, you have to, just like orbital cellulitis, you have to go along the recess, go into the openings and drain. Sometimes they need an external cut. And as much as possible, we should avoid too many FES. This is when you work with your ENT surgeons, you should request them to involve you also, because this patient had about 8 to 9 FES surgeries. And this is all was not willing for a major transcranial approach. For about 2 years, I just made an external cut and tried, and along with the endoscopy, and tried to manage. But finally, she needed a transcranial approach to debride all her sinus. The ENT surgeon was also there. He put in the scope through the nose. The neurosurgeon was there to help out. And this was the end result. A little bit of depression here, which can be taken care of. But at least now she's disease-free almost after 17 years and about 13 surgeries. This is dengue. Sometimes in dengue, most of the times it's hemorrhagic inflammation, but sometimes...
sorry to interrupt, ma'am. Fairuz here, ma'am. If we can quickly wrap, I'll be very, very grateful. Thank you, ma'am.
If there is an endogenous ENDOF and it's not responding only to IV, you'll have to do a evisceration. There was frontal lobe ischemic areas as well. So in dengue, you can get severe ischemia just like mucor. Mucor's main thing is there everywhere. You need to debride and you have to treat. This boy was about 19, juvenile diabetic with about 600 sugars levels, you know. So that's what we have to do. And I would just like to treat them very well with liposomal amphotericin B, which was unfortunately a shortage this time. And they do very well. In mucor cases, you can even incorporate a little bit of steroids. This was a post-renal transplant patient who did. And this is again another kidney failure patient with severe diabetes. Now there is a 2-year follow-up. They have this double density signs. This is also a mucor. He's doing extremely well now. And they, of course, after the IV ampho, they need a course of posaconazole.
Doctor, sorry to interrupt, but other speakers
are... we might have to wrap it up, ma'am.
Okay. And last but not the least, this is the recent ones where they do respond very well, and this was the case of mucor, the recent one with COVID. He responded very well, but unfortunately succumbed to the side effects of the local ampho because liposomal was not available. This is just an example of facial cellulitis. Sometimes we have to debride, and this patient had other comorbidities and had to succumb. Thank you.